The day I found my own key no longer fit the door, I knew something in my life had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. I remember standing there in the dim hallway, the fluorescent light above me flickering like it was nervous to witness what was happening. My hand was shaking, just slightly, but enough that I could feel the tremor travel up my arm. When I tried the key again, and again, each time, that same dull metallic click met me, like the door was whispering, "Not for you, not anymore." It was strange, the way silence settles around you when you suddenly realize you don't belong in a place you've paid for, lived in, laughed in, cried in. A home that, apparently wasn't a home anymore. And the saddest part? I wasn't surprised. Not really. Because deep down, in the quiet corners of my intuition, I had felt something shifting long before the lock ever did. But I didn't want to believe it. Not about her. Not about someone I had trusted enough to share my space with. I slid down the hallway wall, letting my back rest against the chipped paint as I stared at the doorknob like it had betrayed me personally. And in a way it had. It held the final proof of something I had been trying to ignore for months. That my roommate, Aisha, wasn't the person I thought she was. And this was only the beginning. When I first moved into that apartment, it wasn't supposed to be forever, just long enough to get back on my feet after switching careers. Back then, my life was simple. I worked at a small clinic just off the main road, the kind of place where aunties come just to chat, and the receptionist keeps a stash of toffees in her drawer for kids who pretend to be brave. My days were predictable. Tea at 7:30, bus at 8:10, lunch break under the neem tree, and then home by 6:15 to the warm smell of whatever Aisha was cooking. Because she loved to cook. Or maybe she loved to control the kitchen. I didn't question it then. She and I had met through a mutual friend, and in the beginning, living with her felt easy, almost comforting. She worked remote customer support, so she was home most of the day, humming along to old Bollywood songs while she folded laundry or chopped onions. I used to tease her about how she'd cry every single time, and she'd roll her eyes and blame the onions, even when she clearly hadn't begun cutting them yet. There was something warm about her then, something familiar, like an older sister figure even though we were the same age. We didn't have much, but we made the tiny, slightly crooked apartment feel like home. The kind with mismatched cushions and a wobbly dining table, but where the lights were always warm and the tea was always offered without asking. Rent was split neatly down the middle. Bills were shared. Groceries rotated. Everything was fair. And maybe that fairness made me naive, because when you share a roof with someone, you expect a certain level of decency, a certain level of honesty. But the thing about people is, they don't always reveal who they truly are right away. Some take their time. Some wait until you're comfortable. Until you stop looking for red flags. Until you trust them. And that's when the unraveling begins, softly, quietly, without warning. At first it was small things. Aisha asking if I could cover the electricity bill, just this once, because she was waiting for a payment from her job. Or her needing me to pick up groceries because she wasn't feeling well. Favors turned into expectations, expectations into habits. Still, I didn't mind. Life goes through seasons, and I believed hers was just a hard one. But looking back, I realized something important. People show you who they are in the small moments long before the big ones. I just wasn't paying attention. And maybe, if I had paid more attention, I wouldn't have found myself locked out of my own home months later, holding rent receipts in my phone, proof of payments she would later claim she never got. But at the time, all I saw was a friend who needed help. And I helped willingly. The apartment, despite its age and quirks, had become part of my identity. The balcony where we'd drink chai during monsoon season. The little wooden shelf filled with second-hand books. The long corridor where our footsteps echoed differently depending on the time of day. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Ours. That word seems laughable now. I didn't know then that Aisha had a different version of ours in her mind. One where she held the authority, the control, the power. Where the home was hers and I was temporary. But life has a way of giving warnings, small, soft warnings, before the storm hits. And mine came one late evening in the form of a pantry door left slightly open. Not much, right? Insignificant even. Yet it would become the first thread in a web I didn't know I was tangled in. But that comes later. Because before the pantry door, Before the lies, before the locks were changed, there was just us. Two women trying to coexist, sharing space, sharing life. And maybe that's what hurts the most about betrayal. It rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people who knew the color of your favorite mug, the smell of your shampoo, the sound of your footsteps when you're tired. It comes from the person who once handed you the bigger portion of biryani with a smile and said, "You need it more than me today." I should have known something was off when those small kindnesses started disappearing. When the warmth in her tone shifted ever so slightly. When her eyes lingered too long on my payslips clipped to the fridge. But hindsight is a cruel teacher. At the time, all I knew was routine, comfort, and the illusion of friendship. And illusions break quietly, before they shatter loudly. I didn't sleep the night everything finally came out. Not because I was scared anymore, but because my body felt lighter than it had in months. And sometimes peace makes you stay awake just to feel it. Aisha had been removed from the apartment earlier that day. The landlord, embarrassed and furious that she had lied to him as well, apologized so many times that his voice went hoarse. He kept shaking his head, muttering things like, "I trusted her, she seemed so polite." And I didn't have the energy to tell him what I had learned the hard way. Politeness isn't character. Character is what people do when they think no one is watching. He reinstated me as the primary tenant on the spot. Even handed me a new set of keys, still warm from being freshly cut. I held them in my hand like they were something sacred. A reminder that I had a right to be here. A right to my peace. A right to feel safe in my own home. Still, when I walked back inside for the first time after she'd been removed, I froze. The living room felt different. Not because anything had changed. All the furniture was in its place, the cushions still crooked the way I always left them. But the energy was different. Like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been closed too long. I walked slowly, touching the back of the sofa, the bookshelf, the corner of the dining table. All the things that had once belonged to us, now felt like they belonged to me again. That night I made tea. Not because I needed it, but because making tea was the first act of normalcy I craved. The kettle hissed softly, and the smell of cardamom filled the air. And for the first time in a long time, nothing about that moment felt heavy. It felt like breathing. A week later, word travels fast in our community. People talk, neighbors, shopkeepers, the lady who sweeps the hallway and knows everyone's business. At first I worried. I didn't want pity or gossip. I didn't want to be the topic of someone's afternoon chai conversation. But something unexpected happened. People didn't look at me like I was foolish. They didn't look at me with judgment. They looked at me with respect. Mrs. Raymond from downstairs knocked on my door holding a small box of mithai and said, "You handled yourself with more grace than most people twice your age." The guard outside saluted me, which he never did before, and said, "Madam, you were very patient. Too patient." Even the grocery shop guy, who barely ever looked up from his phone, paused when I handed him money and said, "You deserve peace. Good things will come now." Their words didn't heal everything, but they held me up in a way I didn't expect. Sometimes community isn't loud. Sometimes community is a quiet collection of witnesses who saw you endure something unjust and want you to know you didn't imagine it. 2 months later, I found a new roommate, someone recommended by a coworker, with references and a family who had no problem meeting me in person. Her name is Sana, and she moved in with 2 suitcases and a nervous smile. On her first day, she looked around the apartment and said, "It feels peaceful here." And I smiled because she wasn't wrong. There were still small ghosts, not literal ones but emotional echoes in the corners. Like the hesitation I felt when someone slid a bill across the table, or the way I double-checked my rent receipts every month. But healing isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of trust, rebuilt slowly. Living with Sana felt easy in ways I didn't know I needed. She paid her part on time, asked permission before moving anything, and even bought new curtains as a housewarming gift. "I just want the room to feel like yours again," she said softly. And maybe that was the moment I realized something important. One person's betrayal doesn't erase the goodness still left in the world. Not everyone is waiting to take advantage of softness. Not everyone sees kindness as an opportunity to manipulate. Some people simply coexist with sincerity. What happened to Aisha? People ask me this a lot, and I never answered in detail. But here's the truth. She didn't apologize. Not once. Not when she was caught. Not when the landlord confronted her. Not when the police escorted her out. Not even later, when she messaged me months afterward with a simple, "Hope you're doing well." No acknowledgement. No ownership. No remorse. For a while that hurt. With betrayal, the lack of apology is its own kind of wound. But healing taught me something else too. Closure doesn't come from their mouth. It comes from your decision to stop waiting for it. I blocked her number the day I realized I no longer cared about her reasons. Whatever story she told herself to justify what she did, it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. A lesson I carry forward. If there's one thing this experience taught me, one thing I hold on to even now, it's that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And you get to hold the key. For so long, I believed that being understanding meant saying yes to everything. That patience meant letting things slide. That trust meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt long after doubt had already become a pattern. But now I know. You can be kind without letting someone walk over you. You can be patient without erasing your own needs. You can be trusting while still protecting your peace. And most of all, when someone shows you who they are, believe it the first time. I may have lost a friend, or the illusion of one, but I gained something far more important. My space. My safety. My voice. Myself. And that is a kind of victory too. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you for listening to a chapter of my life that took me time and courage to speak aloud. There were nights when I blamed myself. Days when I replayed every conversation, every receipt, every moment I brushed off my own intuition. But healing has a quiet way of showing you the truth. That you can do everything right, and some people will still choose to be unkind. What matters is what you choose afterward. Do you let bitterness settle in? Or do you let the experience carve you into someone wiser, stronger, softer in the right places and firmer in the ones that matter? I chose to reclaim my home. Not just the physical place, but the emotional one too. And if you're listening to this and going through something similar, a betrayal, a broken trust, a sudden shift in someone you thought you knew, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to close the door and open a new one. Now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, standing in a hallway with a key that no longer fit a door you helped pay for, what would you have done? Would you have confronted her? Walked away? Stayed silent? Or fought back like I did? Tell me in the comments. I always read them. And if my story touched your heart today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps me keep telling these stories. Stories of real people, real emotions, real lessons. Until next time, take care of your heart, and take care of your home.